I'd like to apologize for not being able to submit this task on time. Inviting someone over or persuading someone, and we will go into more detail about what is functional language in today's session. The second is, when we're using this functional language, are we using appropriate register? Is it formal, informal, depending on the situation? So if the test taker is required to respond to their fellow classmates, what do you think the language would be like? Would it be formal or informal? Informal, right? So, and if they were to respond to their professor, how would that long language be then? Right? Formal. So that's what we mean by register, using appropriate words, phrases, and grammar. So your vocabulary and grammar is also being tested in response to a situation. Speaking fluently at a natural speed with correct intonation, because when you're persuading someone or you're inviting someone, hey, would you like to come over? Or persuading someone, hey, would it be possible for you to do this for me? You'll see the way the intonation changes, right? So this is what we mean by using correct intonation, using clear pronunciation, consonant sounds, vowel sounds, word stress, sentence stress, connected speech. Being able to do that while they're responding, and using the appropriate tone for the situation. So how your intonation moves, right, is also important. So just a tip in this blue box, test takers are tested not just about the content of the response, but also how they deliver. Content, pronunciation, oral fluency are equally important, right? So make sure that when you are training them for this question type, they are able to do this. You're able to focus on all three traits, because the machine, AI, and the human scorer are looking at all three equally, right? Some key points to remember, that number one, each question has three parts: a background, people that you're responding to, and there's a communicative goal, right? And that is what we need to keep in mind when we are responding to that situation. Get your test takers to use first person language. I'd like to apologize. So imagine that they're sitting across the table and speaking to them. So it has to be in first person. The goal in the respond to a situation may be to apologize, to advise, to complain, to suggest, invite, ask. So make sure that you're giving them enough practice of these type of communicative goals, and match the tone to the audience. So how you would respond to a person as against a small group of people. um, the way that you use your voice changes, your intonation changes, right? And remember, um, this is speaking we're doing without preparation. So you are expected to use short forms, because that is how you show your features of pronunciation. Contractions are encouraged, and that's how you'll be able, how your test takers will be able to get better scores, right? Um, Now that we've finished with what is the understanding the question type, now let's go into how do we go about structuring the response to this particular question type, right? So let's move on. On your screen is a question: how should we structure a response to this particular question type? Respond to a situation. Tell me, what is a typical structure you would use? For me, the first thing that comes to my mind would be, I need to introduce, right? Address the person, right? So I would start by saying, hi, sorry to bother you, or excuse me. So that would be the first part of when the recording starts. That's what I would say. What are the other things that form the structure of a respond to a situation question type. Right? Greet, purpose, excellent points. Very well said. Background or the reason. Right. Thank you very much. Um, and let's look at what's the typical structure over here. Um, the next part would be you need that the test taker will need to state their purpose. So explain why you're talking to that person. I'd like to book this room. I'd like to ask for an extension. So giving the purpose is important. Why are you responding to that person? What is the purpose behind doing that? Right? So give the purpose. The next is someone has mentioned you need to give a little more detail. Remember, there are three parts to the task: the background, the people, and the communicative goal. Now give details, the background, right? So the background is you need to add details. I was late on my way here, so that's why room sorry, I was on my way here that room sorry, I saw on my way here that room 2 is free if you still need a room. So you're giving some more details. If you're late, you're talking about, for example, um, so for example, you're looking at, I heard that, I noticed at the board I noticed on the board that the deadline has been extended. If you are wondering if there's an extension to a assignment, I checked online, but I couldn't find the information I needed. So these are some additional details that you can give. So every situation, give details to it, right? And then there needs to be a call to action. What would you want at the end to close this response? A call to the action would usually be end with a question type. So you finish your response by you, for example, you make a request or you apologize. So would you mind giving me an extension to my assignment? If the situation is that as a test taker you are asking for an extension to an assignment that you were not able to submit on time, or if you're late, would it be possible for me to make this up in another class? So basically a call to action is required, right? So basically there are five parts. You need to have an introduction, you need to state your purpose, you need to give details, and the fourth is about a call to action. How do you close it? And last is being able to do this within 40 seconds, right? So start by addressing the person directly, then clearly explain why you are talking to them, add any extra details that show you understand the context, finish with a call to action. What do you want the other person to do? And remember to keep your response within 40 seconds. This is the typical structure of a respond to a situation question type. This is a recommendation. You can make sub stages as long as the communicative goal is achieved. That is important, right? So this is just a recommendation, a suggestion. Now, um, now let's move. Now that we've looked at this, let's move to what do we need to do inside this, right? What kind of language we can use to be able to get a good score, right? So we will look at samples in a bit. Don't in the previous slide, we saw things like, hi, sorry to bother you. Would you mind? These kind of responses are typical things that people use, and they're called functional language. It makes the response clear, polite and appropriate for the situation. It shows how you can use English in a practical, real world context. This is a real world question type, and it helps your students to structure their responses logically and naturally. So let's first look at, remember, I keep mentioning the communicative goal is very important. Here is a task. What is the communicative goal of this task? I'm reading it out for those people who might not be able to see my screen clearly. You have a deadline next week. Um, this is what I'm focusing on. You have a deadline next week for a paper to submit. However, due to some unforeseen circumstances, you will not be able to complete the paper in time. What would you say to your professor to ask for a week's extension? What is the communicative goal? Any guesses here? Bindia mentions request, and Bindia, you're right. This is the communicative goal. The communicative goal of this particular task is to requesting an extension. Let's do a few more to understand this a little more in detail. Uh, uh, in on this slide, you will see two more tasks of a typical respond to a situation question type. What is the communicative goal of task 1? What is the communicative goal of task 2? Right, task 1 dash, what is the communicative goal? Task 2 dash, communicative goal. Task 1 to pass on information. Task 2, you are right. You're in the first one. The communicative goal that the test taker needs to achieve is informing about a cancellation. So they have to inform this person that they're speaking to about a cancellation, right? And in the second case, they need to ask for directions. Yeah. So this is the communicative goal. So these are what I mean by communicative goal. Now, in PTE, there are a lot of communicative goals, right? And through these communicative goals, we can use functional language. Now, on your screen are some communicative goals numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one, the first one, start conversations, is there in every single respond to a situation question type. And on the next section, where we've got it mentioned as functional language, here are some phrases that can be used to achieve the communicative goal. So the language we need to use to achieve the communicative goal matches with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's in front of you. So for starting conversations, what you can do in terms of functional language is you can say, excuse me, could I ask, making a request, would you mind if, offering help, can I help you with, apologize, I'm sorry for giving suggestions, maybe you could, asking for information, could you tell me, clarify or confirm, do you mean that? So you'll see how I'm varying my intonation so that the language function of requesting, offering, apologizing, suggesting, asking for information, clarifying comes through in not just the words I'm using, but also the way I'm using it. How, and that'll help me score better both in content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. These kind of structures give more fluency to this, they give structures and fluency to test takers. Sure. So, relevant in PT academic. Now, we have to focus on two things in if we want to get good scores in content. Number one is the response has to be original, it needs to be relevant. How does functional in language ensure that the response is original and relevant? Can you put your answers in the chat box? Let's hear from you. to the specific situation. So you'll use certain phrases for apologizing that you won't use for submitting a task, right? Asking for a deadline. So it makes sure that it is used and is situationally appropriate rather than giving a memorized response. And you select phrases that fit the context and making sure your answer is unique to that scenario, right? Remember, the test taker is given a functional language is a part of a sentence. It's not the complete sentence. The second part, the test taker will have to put in their own language to make sure that the communicative goal is achieved, right? So this is how it ensures that the response is original, and functional language helps directly address the task, right? Remember, we are talking about the purpose, making a request, call to action. So your the test taker's response matches with the situation. It ensures that the response actually ensures the respond that if they when a test taker responds to the situation, they actually are describing the prompt, not just talking in generic terms. So in short, functional language helps test takers communicate naturally, appropriately, making their response unique to the situation and directly addressing what is required in PT academic respond to a situation task. So, what would be the most common mistakes to avoid in respond to a situation? Let's hear from you. Can you fumbling, false starts, impolite, irrelevant, inappropriate functional language, not addressing all parts? Wow. Not elaborating, long pauses, pause repetition. Wow, so many very, very relevant points academic respond to a situation. So the first common mistake to avoid is the test taker forgets to mention all the key points from the prompt. So, for example, your prompt is you need to ask your professor for an extension and explain why. An incomplete response would be, can I have an extension? This does not, in this particular response, it does not mention the reason for the extension and thereby missing a key point. So this is a typical example of the first one. The next is change the information. For example, if the prompt says by the end of this week, but you say Saturday, right? So the prompt says submit the assignment by Friday. An incorrect response would be I will submit the assignment by Sunday. So the test taker has changed the deadline, which is a content error, right? The next one is just copy the words from the prompt. Um, for example, the prompt is that you need to ask your friend if they saw the message about the cancelled lecture, and an incorrect example would be, did you see the message about the cancelled lecture? Again, no original language or detail added, just copied from the prompt is the third issue that test takers shouldn't do. Number two, use limited expressions and repetition to respond to the situation. For example, I'd like, right? An example would be, I'd like to know where the library is. I'd like to find out the library. I'd like to help you. Repetitive, limited expressions used. The next one is pre-memorize an answer. This will not cover the main points of the situation and will be scored very low. So, for example, the prompt is you need to ask for an extension because you are sick. An incorrect example would be, hello, I'm a student in your class. I'm writing to request an extension for my assignment, right? Uh, so it's a generic memorized response, doesn't mention being sick or other details from the prompt. The next one, summarizing the situation. This is not a summary task. Summary task is summarizing group discussion, which will appear in the next webinar. So summarizing, for example, again, let's take the same example. You need to inform your friend about a cancelled lecture. The incorrect example would be the lecture was cancelled and you may not know about it. This is just a summary, doesn't communicate directly or has any call to action. right? It's next one. Be too polite if you have a strong request. Would you possibly versus I need. Choose the correct language for the right context to complete the task. So for the prompt, now I'm giving you another example. You need an urgent extension for your assignment. An incorrect example would be, would you possibly consider maybe giving me little more time? It's not, if it's not too much trouble. It's too polite and indirect for an urgent request. It should be more direct, right? The last one, give your opinion on whether the task is reasonable or not, and making suggestions on how the situation could be improved or resolved or changed. Again, let's take another example. You need to ask for directions to the library. An incorrect example would be, I think the campus should have better signs and maybe the library should be moved to a more central location. Giving opinions and suggestions instead of asking for directions, right? So through in this slide we've covered the most common mistakes to avoid. Don't forget key points, mentioning don't forget key points, changing information, or just copying the words from the prompt. Avoid repetitive or limited language, and don't use pre-memorized answers. This is not a summary task, so don't just summarize the situation. uh, use the right level of politeness for the context. Don't be overly polite if the situation calls for a strong request. Finally, don't give your opinion or task or suggest changes. Just respond to the situation as described. Nandini, I think we very clear that we are looking at having the two things that as trainers we need to focus on. Let's look at what we should do with our test takers as against what we shouldn't do, right? What we should do is making sure that the content is relevant, the content is original. Make this the mantra in your classroom: relevant, original, relevant, original, relevant, original. Let's not focus on things like what we shouldn't do, like templates or memorized responses, right? So we now covered on the common mistakes to look out for, and now let's go into some sample responses, right? I'm going to show you a task, and I'm going to show you two sample responses. You need to decide whether they are good samples or not a good sample. So here on the screen are two in the chat box. Please put in good A, B, not good A, B, right?
You are doing the group project for the class. The other members of your group have asked you to prepare the slides for the presentation. You are willing to do the same.
Please mention against the letter.
You need them
Is it good
to
or not good?
contribute.
All are in agreement that A is a good sample. Now let's look at why is it a good sample, and the explanation is on the screen. This is an excellent answer for the content. It covers the main information. It's talked about your willingness to design the slides. You need more information, and you need this information before this weekend. So this means that the primary communicated goal has been met, right? And the test taker has communicated with ease and the response is fully developed. In terms of language, it is polite, first person, and this is do not see an audio of it, but it
Try
uses the correct
question.
intonation to make it persuasive and strong enough
Contribute
to request for the slides. Salutation pavera means when you start off the conversation, you do start off with something, right? Remember, respond to a situation, you would need to
to
say something to start
send
that
me the
situation, right? To start the response to the situation. So, hi, excuse me, sorry to bother you. Can I get your attention, please? Right? These are some ways to start the conversations, and in writing we call it salutations, right? This is a good example. This is what our test takers should be doing, right? Right. Yes, if the content is templated and is memorized, 0 not just the content, the pronunciation and oral fluency throughout. It's a high risk. Right. So we've looked at some good samples, not good samples. Um, Paraphrasing is encouraged. Remember, this test is to check your language. Kiran, content is not king. There are three kings in this: content, pronunciation, oral fluency, all are equally, and we get students to get enough practice, right? There is no negative marking in this question type. Situation card shuffle, right? Basically, this objective of this this activity is to encourage both formal informal registers and depending on the shuffle card, right? So basically you can prepare small cards. You're arriving late, you're asking for an extension, you're asking for directions, you're making suggestions, and you get students to randomly pick up a card, and they get 10 seconds to prepare and respond within 30 to 40 seconds. They can do this in pairs, and their peer who's listening to them can has a checklist in front of them, and they're looking at three things. Did they address the person directly, right? Did they use first person to address? Did they explain why they were talking? Was the purpose clear? Number three, was the background sufficiently described? And number four, was there a call to action? Was there a question at the end to close it? So these are some ways that you can get peer feedback, takes a little pressure off you, right? The next is how to do role plays. Basically, through role plays, we're building fluency and appropriacy through the short dialogues. So you can pair students. One reads the situation, the other gives the response. After 20 seconds, they switch roles, and you as a trainer can monitor and add. You say, hey, you forgot to do a call to action, hey, you forgot to add details, right? And you can monitor this particular activity. Basically it's to practice timing and fluency. Here the teacher can play the official timing of 10 seconds prep, 40 seconds, and students respond to something that you portrayed on a on your screen. If they finish early, their peers can suggest one extra detail that you can add. If they run out of time, they can practice reducing their responses. And do let us know in the next session how did that go for you, right? So these are use, and I'm going to come towards the end where we have created a special guide that talks about the do's and don'ts, the test tips. That is where you can find it from. My colleague will post this link at the bottom of the screen where you can get this test tips document from. That's one. Number two, sample answers with explanations. For the two new question types, we have written and audio samples available, as well as examiner explanations. Remember, I showed you sample A, sample B with explanations. I've taken it from here. So